Syracuse Podcast. You can find us wherever you get your pods. Also find us on YouTube. We are there now. Subscribe to the show. This is episode 401 of our podcast forum, but I think episode 5 for YouTube. So we're making strides YouTube-wise. But we've got Matthew Gutierrez, part 2 today. Got to get into some football stuff in the back half of the show. We will also continue our most important DB countdown. But because football season is coming up, just want to remind you guys real quick about the Locked On Ultimate NFL season preview that is dropping on August 30th, running through September 8th. Some great experts there, so be sure to subscribe to that wherever you get your podcasts. And let's dive into part 2 now with Matthew Gutierrez.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so we had a rare debate on the show the other day. Tyler and I are usually in lockstep, but we had a disagreement over how many high school guys should be added in this 2022 cycle now. Currently at 2. I was saying they should get to 4. Tyler is a big proponent of the transfer portal, which is great. It's another avenue now to get guys. But what would you say is the ideal number for high school commits in the 2022 class?
Yeah, bummed out. I'll have to go back and listen to your guys' debate. It's an interesting question. I know I'll touch on Buddy real quick. I always thought this was going to be his last year. I'm leaning toward that way still, no matter what, no matter how much he goes off this season. If he shoots 45% from 3, there are going to be a lot of questions about whether he can guard anybody at the next level. So that might not get him drafted. So, my thought is, look, if he's not going to be a surefire draft pick, maybe he sticks around for a 5th year and makes a ton of money again. I'm assuming he's going to be well north of 300K this year. I'm guessing maybe even 300 or 400 grand at least. Who knows, right? I really don't know where to ballpark it at this point. We'll probably get an idea at some point. But given what Alabama was able to bring in for their quarterbacks, I don't see why Syracuse can't have their top dog bring in at least a couple hundred grand. So that kind of factors into my answer, though, because if he's gone, you obviously you'll have Justin Taylor start right away. But if he stays, Taylor will wait, and then you might have some traffic in the guard position, right? If Buddy stays, again, you have Quadir Copeland coming in, the portal's available. Gerard and Buddy are going to play 40 minutes. Does that push guys to the portal? We talked about Shrader, Jimmy Boeheim. They both might not be on the team after this season. So, Jimmy Boeheim definitely won't be, but Cole doesn't have to stay 2 years. So the hard part is it's hard to say right now, depending on when guys leave. I think if you're Syracuse at this point recruiting, you want at least 3 guys. I think you need a forward or a center. I don't think you necessarily need a 5 or a 4-man or certainly 4 guys in the class. I think you can rely on the portal. I think if you're Syracuse, you want to just try to lock up at least one more big man, feel pretty good going into the spring portal, and then you can always replace holes based on who's available at that point. If you're Syracuse, I think you need size and experience in the 4/5 position, and I don't know if you can do that through high school recruiting unless you get a guy like Dominic Barlow, and Chris Bunch. Maybe they both, if they both come, which is unlikely, then you're maybe looking a little bit better. But the only way I think Syracuse would want 4 or 5 guys in the class is if they get guys they really want, right? Like a JJ Starling type player. Although I'm leaning toward him probably looking at a school like Stanford, Alabama, Carolina. It seems like that's probably most likely with him. So it'll be an interesting thing to follow. But to answer that question, I think you need 3, not necessarily 4.
So you've given your guess, or more like your wish list of what it will be. But if you had to guess, what's the coaching staff's pulse? Are they leaning more towards the transfer portal, or are they leaning more towards dipping their toe into the high school game?
I think the latter. I think they probably want 3 or 4 guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a whiteboard or something that says like they need 4 and they're mapping it out. Given that, maybe they know Buddy's gone no matter what. Maybe they know Cole might only be here a year. Maybe they know Jimmy Boeheim is gone, which he is, and maybe they're anticipating a center to leave or someone else to transfer out. And so they're gonna bank on needing 4 guys through high school recruiting and then maybe add a fifth or sixth player, in the class through the portal. So yeah, it's my guess is they're banking on at least one more player, maybe two, is what I'm leaning toward.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think it's going to be very telling what happens this year with all the new transfers, how they fit into the 2-3 zone. Because in theory, and I know Boeheim has refuted this a lot recently, but in theory, to me, it seems like if you add a transfer, that might not be great for the 2-3 zone defense, because it seems like a 2-3 zone defender gets better in year 2, year 3 of the system. So that's why I feel like high school recruits are still important for them to get a guy, develop them. And also, as much as Cole Swider, I think, is going to be good this year, a lot of the transfer portal guys out there are guys that have kind of underperformed at their other stops. So I don't know. I think it's going to be very telling what happens in this specific year with a guy like Cole Swider, Symir Torrance, those types.
Yeah, it's a great point. We didn't touch on it, but the transfers that have come through Syracuse have not typically been very good defenders. You look at obviously the Andrew Whites, John Gillens, even Alan Griffin. I know he was known for a lot of those weak side blocks, but he was very lost at times in the zone, and Jim Boeheim will tell you that, especially late in the year, he wasn't quite picking up his part of the slack defensively, and that led to why he wasn't really on the floor that much, and didn't hurt that he wasn't shooting quite as well. So yeah, to your point, I think if you're Syracuse, you probably still want to build guys in your mold, right, in your system from high school rather than the portal. I think they'll be a little bit more targeted with the portal. And then in high school, they'll really look for those Chris Bunch, Dominic Barlow guys who are really long, and like a Woody Newton, like a Robert Braswell. They both left the program. But those are the types of guys they're trying to get, right? And like you said, you can probably develop them defensively over 2-3 seasons rather than a transfer who's, probably looking to come in and they won't tell you this, but try to be more of a stat guy, right? And be an offensive player. And the zone might just be more of an ancillary thing to a lot of transfers.
I like that little 5-star basketball clinic you just put on right there, that little demonstration video. That's pretty good. They might need to recruit you next season. Hey, if J.R. Smith can go back to school and play golf now, I think Goody still has a couple years of eligibility. I don't know. Maybe I don't think. Well, you got to 5'2". You got it right. It's how tall you got to be to ride the roller coaster, right? No, we love you, Goody. We love you. You know that. Just a couple of other odds and ends from basketball before we get into the Alliance and football and all that stuff. But I saw you cued us in on this tweet from John Rothstein the other day about Barama Sidibe and his health status, how he still has not been cleared to play yet, according to Jim Boeheim. What is his outlook for the upcoming season? Are you anticipating that he will be ready to go for the opener?
Yeah, I thought that was just bizarre. I know he's been back in Africa for at least part of the summer with family, and he is noble and what Barama's aiming to do. I think he's aiming to go into leadership and government and just help people is his mojo. And anytime you talk with him, you get the vibe that he's not only a respectful person but motivated and a great student. I think he's the best student on the team, GPA wise. So that's I just don't want to. This is not personal on Barama. He's been struck a lot of misfortune with his injuries, and I think if you're Syracuse, you probably need to move on at this point. He's still not cleared. This would have been another key development. He's going to be way behind now. He really hasn't played basketball in basically a year, right? Because it was the first game of last year. It's going to be almost a year now. Look, maybe he'll prove us wrong and be a double-double guy. I just don't see it with the knees, which have not only hampered him in college, but in high school as well. He had a lot of knee tendonitis and knee pain. Again, there were times he would go to the Carrier Dome as an underclassman at Syracuse and tell Boeheim his knees hurt and he just wouldn't play or play that much. And they would just go with Pascal Chukwu, who very underrated defender. We don't give him a lot of credit. Yeah. Jim Boeheim, I think, what was it, the press conference last year, said, he's good for one missed layup and 2 missed dunks or something, but one of the better rim protectors recently. And you look at that 2018 team, that Sweet 16 team, they were top 5 in KenPom defense, and he was a big reason why. Obviously, big guards up front. But anyway, with Barama, I really don't understand the allegiance and reliance on him, right? I mean, last year Coach Boeheim said that they went into the season with the operative understanding that he was just going to be their guy, which is a kind of a head scratcher given his injury history. I think they really need to focus on developing these young centers and basically going into the season expecting the worst with Brahma. And then look, if he pleasantly surprises you, great. But I think you need to just go in, hey, Jesse and Frank are two guys. If Brahma is somehow cleared last minute, great. Now we have some depth here and maybe some experience. But to expect much out of Brahma at this point, I think is not only unfair to the other centers who are training hard with Coach Alan Griffin. It's unfair to Brahma to expect that much from a guy who's got a lot of injuries that are pretty much out of his control.
You wrote a good article recently about basically a dream scenario for Syracuse next season, and what if the stars aligned, what would it take for them to be really good? I know Buddy was mentioned in that article, but what were some of the other things that you think have to come together for Syracuse to be a top 25 team next year?
Yeah, that was basically, what needs to happen here. What's the blueprint for Syracuse to not be a bubble team for like the eighth straight? I think it'd be the seventh or eighth straight year. Was it seven or eight, basically? I know in 2019 they kind of pushed off the bubble late, but for the most part they've been a bubble team, right? And they've been defined as that.
It's getting back to like the 5 seed, the 6 seed, right, or better. Yeah. That's the Syracuse that was the expectation.
Exactly. So that article was just, what needs to happen. Like you said, Buddy obviously needs to be the star that he can be. And it'll be, I don't think we put too much stock into the late run he had. He did have COVID last season, in fairness, but he wasn't an amazing shooter last season. The COVID stoppages don't help anybody. So I would caution he might not be on fire out of the gate. Who knows? Maybe he'll be a 45% guy all season, but it might take a little time for him to get going. And as he said, all shooters go through ups and downs. But the big thing is 3-point shooting overall. This is going to be a really good offense, and I think they're going to have to score a lot to win games, no doubt. Right? Joe Girard, is going to need to be a better than a 30% shooter, which he's been for quite some time. He's going to need to not turn the ball over as much, stay on the court, play some better defense. Cole Swider's going to come in probably off the bench and be asked to hit some threes, 40% shooter at Nova. So you have some 3-point shooting there. Benny Williams also would be a key one. I envision him starting. I think you guys probably see that as well. 5-star guy, basically 4-star, I think, for the 247 composite, but he's the top rated freshman per that composite since Chris McCullough, and I think they're really high on him. If he can be the star that people around the program think he can be, this team has a lot more upside, especially offensively. He's a really good mid-range guy, really strong for his age, and good around the rim too, which they could really use. So a couple points there, and then defense. I'm not as high on. I think they can definitely be okay defensively. They'll have some smart players on the floor. Artie's got a high IQ. Jimmy's a high IQ player. Cole is not athletic, but he has experience. And then you might have Jesse at center, and he's been a real factor as a rim protector. So the defense might not be that bad if they can rely on length and IQ rather than athleticism. So those are a few things that I think could really push this team off the bubble. And mind us that Boston College is going to be probably some easy wins. NC State doesn't really impress you that much. Virginia Tech's going to be decent, I guess. But there's really only a few teams here that are probably better than Syracuse on paper. So there is room in the ACC to definitely sneak up in the top half.
Hey, did you know that Built Bar has 9 delicious flavors, including the occasional limited time flavor as well? When you talk to Built Bar fans like Tim and myself, they're passionate about their favorites. Peanut butter brownie for me, peanut butter brownie for Tim. What we're trying to tell you there is you need some peanut butter brownie in your life, and do it with Built Bar. They've got 9 flavors. There's a little bit of something for everyone. And if you haven't tried them all, you can get a mix box where you'll get 2 of each of their 9 flavors. Also, they're healthy for you as well. Most flavors have 17 grams of protein while only containing 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar. Order today. Get the raspberry, get the mint brownie, get the salted caramel, or do what Tim and I do. Get the peanut butter brownie. Go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your first off at BuiltBar.com. All right, let's get to some of this other stuff here, news and notes from around Syracuse and the ACC, but I think it starts with the Alliance. I think this is not out of left field per se, but it's something that if you told us 5 months ago that, hey, you're going to see 3 conferences kind of team up here, you would have been thrown for a loop. And so what do you make of the alliance? Is this actually something that holds a lot of weight, or is this literally 3 conferences getting together and all jumping onto the life raft right now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the latter. I think it's more of a logistical component here, and there's probably some deep financial reasons that will probably play out over time here. I don't know if it'll impact things too much. Maybe a couple more, quote unquote, old Big East rivalries, for example, for Syracuse, maybe not. I just think a lot of this, probably could have been done without the alliance. And I'm interested in learning more about it, though. I'm still kind of scratching my head at the whole thing and trying to understand realignment like everybody else. It's big change right now, and I just don't know Syracuse's specific role at this point moving forward.
So let's talk some football now. Quarterback position. There's been some interesting quotes recently from Dino Babers, first to Stephen Fonte, then he did a press conference talking about how he believes Garrett Shrader deserves to play right now. Based on what he's seen, he wants to give him a shot in games. He also said DeVito's in the lead. What do you make of maybe incorporating a 2-quarterback system for Syracuse? And how would you handle the quarterback position this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think Tommy gets the upper hand, probably based on everything Dino has said recently. He's still Dino's guy, right? We know that. And he still played a big role in Dino's vision for the program. So I think that doesn't change. I think he still keeps Tommy on a pretty long leash, and just tries to really give him that fair chance he might not have had given the offensive line's limitations in the recent years. That said, I think if things get out of hand, you go to Shrader right away. He's a tough kid. I know he's been likened to Eric Dungey. I think you certainly go to him in any run situations. I think that's what Dino's going to do in short yardage, or in times when Tommy's not maybe throwing the ball well or his timing's off. I think you put Shrader in. Now, as far as how I would handle it, I would probably have Tommy on a little bit of a shorter leash, and I would have Shrader ready to go. Who I know we've even talked about his throwing motion it looks a little unorthodox, a little awkward, but if he's going to be a tough kid and he's not going to sit there and complain or take sacks or just kind of try to throw deep balls, and he's going to really make plays like Dungey Media. I think you go to him early, right? You go to him in week 3 if you're 0-2, right? If things are out of hand, you need to correct quickly. The ACC is not going to be easy for Syracuse, so that strong start is super important. It's not going to be an easy way to look. Dino's not in an awesome position either way. So I don't necessarily envy how he has to try to gauge this situation. I do think it's something that is in week 1, week 2. You guys are going to talk about it, and we're going to really have to read and react to how guys are doing in certain situations. It's hard to see right now. Last year was, just the train wreck it was. In fairness to Syracuse, there's just a lot of injuries, a lot of things were out of whack. So I think starting in week 1, let's start, if I'm Dino Babers, start with Tommy. And then if things get out of hand or the offensive line isn't there, then you really got to mix it up and be more agile, more flexible than Syracuse has been in the past. We can talk about tight ends, et cetera, but just being more able to adapt and adjust on the fly. You just got to keep shaking it up because clearly the last 2 years, aside from 2018, things have not been working.
Yeah, you bring up the schedule, how it really doesn't do any favors, and the ACC can be tough. And that's something that Tim and I talked about. I think that Dino Babers is in a tough situation right here because of he's facing a quarterback battle right now, and B, how you ramp them up, because there is no preseason in college football unless you count the non-conference. But the way that Syracuse's non-conference lines up, I don't think is ideal. It would have been nice to start with Albany, then go to Ohio, then go to Rutgers, and then you get into ACC play or Liberty or whatever. I don't have the schedule out in front of me right now, but yeah. The way that it all lines up, you're starting with Ohio on the road where you are an underdog. Then you've got Rutgers, a Power 5 opponent. Then you get the cupcake in Liberty. It's
in
not
Albany,
an enviable
yeah.
situation. In Albany. It's not an enviable situation right now for Dino Babers to figure out who his quarterback is.
No, it's not. It's tricky. Look, they've had a lot of time with Tommy. I mean, they really need to know who he is. I know from what we've heard, and I think we even texted about it. It seems like he's seen as a outstanding passer with a great arm. I don't think anyone can take that from him. He really can sling it. He's got a very effortless release. It's fluid. He's a guy who it's seemingly dominates Syracuse football practices and has for years. And, in some cases, I think we've heard outplayed Eric Dungey as far as a passer in practice. Now, when you get to games, everything changes, right? I mean, you get to the, you studied for the SAT, and then you get to the SAT, and the nerves are kicking in. Maybe you spill coffee or late. It just shit happens, right? And you need to be able to adjust. And I think that's where Tommy hasn't held up to what Syracuse thought he could be. And so that's unfortunate. I don't know if it can be corrected now. And what will be Tommy's 17, 18, 19, 20, fifth year on campus. He got to campus in the fall of 17. So I know he doesn't have 5 years of playing experience, but 5 years on campus, he's seen a lot of practices. He knows Dino Babers well. He knows what they need him to do. It's just a matter of doing it. So that's kind of where my thought was, to your point on the schedule and everything, is he's got to have a relatively quick leash. He hasn't had the fairest of opportunities with the offensive line, but 1-2 games, if things are really shaky, I think you have to go right to Shrader. At least give him a chance. You brought him in. He's a former SEC guy who maybe doesn't have the best arm on the roster, but probably the most legit experience and quality playing time on this team.
So last year, there were a couple guys that really stepped up when injuries happened. Garrett Williams, one of them, Sean Tucker, another. Who are some guys that maybe you're circling this year to come from sort of lower on the depth chart? We're not thinking about them a ton, but maybe have a breakout year.
Yeah, it's a good one. Definitely the two guys you list there. I think Duce Chestnut is someone who really could rise up on this team. I don't even think he's all that overlooked at this point. But I wrote about him briefly last year, met with him. His connection with Andre Cisco, his vision for fulfilling that role, and as he put it, trying to get the Syracuse defense back to what it was, some resemblance of what it was in the 90s, where the dome is rocking and the defense is shutting down people, and he wants to be part of that quote unquote shutdown D. And this is now year 2 for both coordinators, year 2 obviously for Coach White and the defense. This is a time when I think you need to start to see some adjustments, some improvements, and some progress, right? Just some progress. We're not asking for, I think, 8-4 or 7-5, but you want to see a progression, right? To keep the fan base somewhat intrigued and optimistic. And I think if I had to pinpoint one guy, it'd probably be Mr. Chestnut.
All right, that's Matthew Gutierrez from The Athletic. Appreciate your time, Goody. Again, subscribe to The Athletic. What we always say on this show, Tim, if you don't like sports, you don't subscribe to The Athletic. If you like sports, you subscribe to The Athletic, because it is the best out there for getting all your latest sports info and all that stuff. So subscribe, read all Goody's work. Looking forward to seeing all of your coverage down the road, and looking forward to the Syracuse football season, whatever it may bring for 2021. Thanks for your time, Goody.
Hey, thank you guys so much for the kind words. Thanks for having me, and definitely, get your back there. Got to subscribe to Locked On Syracuse as well. Something I think every Cuse fan needs to do. Make it a hobby. I do it when I'm walking dogs, when I'm outside, whatever. You can make it a part of your day. So I appreciate it.
It is that time of year again. All eyes are now turning to football, NFL, college football, tons of games to bet on as the gridiron starts to rev back up. And as always, the best place, the number one spot for all your pro and college football betting action this season is BetOnline, the top online sportsbook out there. You can get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including BetOnline's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest, open now at betonline.ag. Just type that in your mobile browser or on a website. Just put in betonline.ag. Sign up today for a free account. Use our promo code that's locked on, all one word. It gets you a 100% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So if you've got a future you're thinking about for the NFL, a Super Bowl dark horse maybe, just go over to betonline.ag. Don't forget that promo code. It's Locked On, all one word, for 100% welcome bonus at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Okay, time for our number one most important defensive back. It is Duce Chestnut, the freshman who we're thinking will probably be a starting cornerback opposite Garrett Williams. Signs are pointing that way in camp. Yes, that'd be awesome to see. I think he'd be, we've touched on this a little bit, but maybe 5 or 6 in terms of number of freshmen in like the last 20 years that have started game one as a true freshman for Syracuse. Andre Cisco was one of them. Right? Yep. Wasn't Cisco one of them? Or am I
Cisco
making that
was one. Kendall Coleman was another. There have been some good quality guys that Syracuse has had. And I think one of the underrated things when we talk about Duce Chestnut is that he's going to have one of those guys on the staff this year. This is Dino Baber's largest staff that he's ever had. And Kendall Coleman's a part of that. I believe he's a quality control assistant for this team. And Coleman's a guy who's a starter as a freshman. And that's going to be a nice little resource to lean on for Duce Chestnut because he can run some of these things by him.
Right. And I feel like anytime I read something about Syracuse camp, practice observation, scrimmage, whatever, there's like a little blurb. I've gone to Cuse.com and read their recaps of the scrimmages. And a lot of times it's like Duce Chestnut, pick 6. Duce Chestnut had a turnover. He just seems to be getting his hands on the ball a lot. Yeah, I think right away, Dino's first press conference way back in the spring, he was like, yeah, Duce made a pick today. He made some plays out there. So he's been talked about a lot, as much as you can be. Syracuse keeps things pretty close to the vest, but as much as you can be talked about, I think he has been talked about. And now there's a lot of hype for him going in. If you're following this thing pretty closely, we're expecting big things from Duce Chestnut, as we were when he committed, because he was a highly rated guy.
I think the last time you heard a freshman talked about like this, it was Andre Cisco. You're hearing the same things in terms of general verbiage, but you're also hearing the same things in terms of physical on-field attributes, physicality being one of those, and aggressiveness. Those are things you heard with Andre Cisco when he was a freshman who started in the spring game, which you don't see freshmen start in spring game. Early enrollees in a spring game, and for a Syracuse team that really didn't have that this year, I'm sure we would have seen Duce. I can't remember if he was an early enrollee or not, but
he was,
Okay, so that's something that when you hear these things, you hear the readiness for a guy like Duce Chestnut as a true freshman. It makes you excited as a Syracuse fan because this is a highly rated guy. His recruiting ranking may have dipped a little bit because of what happened and the COVID pandemic, and his ability to actually see the field was hampered from this past season. So I'm excited with Duce. When you're hearing the same things from the same staff, really, that had Andre Cisco out there, yeah, there's reason to be excited for stuff like that.
He feels like the typical Syracuse defensive back as well, of recent, at least since Dino has taken over, where he's probably going to make some big turnover-worthy swinging plays, and he's probably going to have some big plays on the other way where he lets a touchdown because he was risky or something like that. And he's a freshman, so he's going to make mistakes. It's not going to be flawless. We talked about this yesterday, but Garrett Williams is on the other side of him if they do start him. So he's going to get picked on a lot. He's going to be the Garrett Williams of last year. Teams are going to target him and see what he's got early and often. But I think he's up for the challenge, much like Cisco was. And the reason why he's number one most important defensive back for us is because if he is up for the challenge and he does sort of pan out, I think that elevates this defensive back for him so much, because we're talking about maybe 2 of the better corners in the ACC, which sounds crazy to say, and I don't want to put it on Duce Chestnut, but he has that type of potential.
Looking back at last season, okay, let's take injuries out of the equation, okay, which is tough to do with the Syracuse defensive backfield. But let's just say if he played or Trill played every single game and Cisco played every single game. If you were to retroactively make the list after the conclusion of week 11 last season and say who was the most important defensive back last year, you would have said Garrett Williams, because he was the guy who was out there, was getting all sorts of attention from the opposing quarterbacks. He was being thrown at. He was being picked on time and time again. And guess what? I see that same exact scenario playing out this season with Duce Chestnut now. When I made my notes for Duce, again, it's tough to make some notes for guys who have not seen the field yet. I literally took all the stats that I had about Garrett Williams yesterday on the show, and I copy and pasted them for Duce this because the same situation applies here, right? 67 targets last year for Garrett Williams. That was the most, or the sixth most of any player in the entire country. Deuce is probably going to get a lot of that. And guess what? The ACC quarterback situation this year got even better in terms of the depth of quarterbacks. So you're going to see a lot of talented quarterbacks try to fire at a freshman. And we're going to see if Duce Chestnut's up for the challenge pretty early on.
Yeah, they're playing some good quarterbacks too. I know Trevor Lawrence isn't there anymore, but I mean, there's some, like, even the Liberty quarterback, Willis, is probably going to be an NFL guy, and he was pretty good against us last year. Yeah, so
you look across the board. I mean, Boston College is a team that now throws more. I think about, I mean, you say, okay, no more Trevor Lawrence. We'll just throw in a new 5-star. DJ Uiagalelei played well in that Notre Dame
could win the
game
Heisman
when he was
no big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
There are so many quarterbacks in this league now. I mean, Florida State has Mackenzie Milton now. I mean, all these
There's
different
a little competition
guys
there, right?
Right. All these different guys who have shown it, have done it. And Duce Chestnut's going to have to be ready pretty early on, or otherwise, well, the defense could really take a bad turn. Really take a bad turn.
Well, we are certainly a big Duce Chestnut podcast. Very excited to watch him play. Very excited to watch his career. And he is our number one most important DB. We started this back on Monday, so if you missed any of the other defensive back profiles, go back. You can check us out on YouTube as well. You can now watch all our episodes there. Subscribe to the show. Just put in Locked On Syracuse on YouTube. It'll pop right up. Follow us on Twitter at @LO_Syracuse. And we'll be back with you guys next week, and we will be counting down quarterbacks and then getting you ready for a real game.
Guess
Ohio
what?
Previews next week.
We've got a preview next week. That to me is absurd. We've made it. We've made it. Football's around the corner. We've got a game to preview. We've got quarterbacks to talk about. It's a big week for the quarterbacks too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to figure out who's starting. I think both you and I are in agreement. It'll probably be Tommy DeVito now, but Garrett's going to see his licks. All right. So the quarterback competition really stretches into game one.
Yep. Football fans, this is the time to subscribe right now. We are going to get you all dialed up for Ohio, everything you need to know about them, everything you need to know about the quarterback battle. We're going to be talking quarterbacks next week, and any other season preview type stuff is on next week's pod. We're here with you guys every single weekday, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.